Right, I will read the passage. It's a very straightforward and simple passage, but there we go. Now, what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to split it into two bits. I'm going to talk about comments. Look, I want to look at the where in New Testament the Gospels talk about Jesus's birth. Quite interesting before I get to the emotional bit. So I'm going to look at two elements here. So one's practical and one's kind of emotional. So let me go through and read it. The first time I'm going to read it in the authorized, well, no, it's the NIV. And it is Luke 1:39 to 45. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zachariah's home to meet Elizabeth. Elizabeth was old, just let's get straightforward, and Mary was very young. Very interesting, but they were related. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. And in a loud voice, she shouted. She bellowed it out, in a sense, with joy. In a loud voice, she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leapt for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord has said, what the Lord has said will be accomplished." Okay, so I'm going to look first of all, because it intrigued me. I thought, well, I'll look up in the Gospels and see where the references kind of follow each other. And as you know, kind of lots of the miracles and things, you see it in John, you see it in Luke, you see it in Mark, and it's slightly different. So I thought I'll just have a look at all these. So I turned to the Gospels and I looked to see what they said about Jesus' birth. And it's interesting because neither Mark or John say anything, nothing at all. And Matthew, the only bit he says is about, he talks about the wise men and Joseph's problem with a pregnant Mary. Those are the only bits. So you have to go to Luke to get the problems. It's quite interesting. You see, and if I just follow that through for a minute, Joseph only appears again in the Gospels when Jesus was 12 and they both went to Jerusalem for some particular thing that they do when you're 12. And you hear that, of course, Mary and Joseph were returning back to their home, and they suddenly found that Jesus wasn't there. So they hopped it and went to Jerusalem, and they found him in the temple. But you don't hear anything more about Joseph at all. So by the time, presumably, this is right, by the time Jesus was ready for ministry at 30, you assume that Joseph had died. Another kind of interesting thing that I thought of, well, look, when they all went to Jerusalem when Jesus was 12, there was no brothers mentioned at all. The only time you hear about brothers was when Jesus is ministering, and he talks about his brothers not believing and this type of thing at that time. So it's interesting that there is so little that you can put down in writing. So there we go. So let's look at Luke then. Luke includes, as you probably have heard on the preaching, Mary and Elizabeth, Zachariah's story in the temple, and the very late baby, which of course was John the Baptist, which was 6 months older than Jesus. In Luke, you have the birth of Jesus. you have the shepherds and the angels, and you have Simeon and Anna. Now, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because he is the only one who brings a depth to the first years of Jesus' life. Interesting. Now, Luke, it is said that Luke wrote both this Gospel and Acts as a complete record of events, perhaps to be used in the trial with Paul in Rome. So he's very factual. He goes through everything. But it is an interesting fact that I'm sure non-Christians could bring this up and said, goodness me, this guy, Luke, I wouldn't trust a word he said. Look, there's only this written here. So can you put all this evidence that you shout about at Christmas time and the angels coming and all this type of thing? Goodness me, it's only written there once. Isn't that interesting? So I'll leave that with you as quite an interesting kind of look at the thing. Now let's just look then. This is quite short today, I think. Let's look at this passage read in the Message. And it says, when Mary heard about the birth that Elizabeth had a baby coming, off she went. So Mary didn't waste a moment. It says she got up and traveled to a town in Judah in the hill country, straight to Zachariah's house, and greeted Mary. So that you've got them virtually at the door of the house. Basically, they've hardly got inside, and so you've got this situation. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the babe in her womb leapt, and she was filled with the Holy Spirit and sang out exuberantly, "You are so blessed among women, and the babe in your womb also blessed. Why am I so blessed that the mother of my Lord visits me? The moment the sound of your greeting entered my ears, the babe in my womb leapt, skipped like a lamb for sheer joy. Blessed woman who believed that what God said, believed every word would come true." Now we stop there because it's Mary's bit tomorrow. So there isn't a lot I can say about this except that, where is my notes? That's on this page over here, I think. 1, 2, 3. Yes, that's it. That's the right bit. Page 3. This passage, shall we say, I think it is the most personal, intimate, and emotional and gripping in the Bible. You can't just pass it by and not feel some element of absolute amazement. It's totally personal, not normally what would be shared. You would only share it between yourselves. And I would say that I'm the wrong person to talk about it, because the depth and perhaps the breadth can only be understood by a woman. I think it's probably the right thing to say. For Elizabeth at that moment, it's an absolute moment of ecstasy. She was filled at one moment. Mary had hardly gotten the door, and she kind of was actually overwhelmed. And she said the baby leapt in the womb. The Spirit released. They'd hardly, they perhaps didn't know much about each other anyway. We think this is the only time they met, and they met for 3 months, up to basically the time when John the Baptist was born. So it's just, I think, you see, I can't do justice to the depth of the emotion here. So I can't kind of enter into the same pattern of delight, but it was obviously a very, very intimate moment that gets written in the Bible because of its absolute amazement. The immediate response, the babe in my womb skipped like a lamb for sheer joy, says Elizabeth. Totally released totally overwhelmed at that moment of meeting. It was a God moment, as he does to us sometimes. And absolutely, it was perhaps unexpected. There was Mary knocking at the door, asked in, and it all happened virtually on the doorstep. This amazing realization that both of them were very, very involved in the birth of the Messiah, that was quite stunning. She was filled, Mary Elizabeth was filled with joy. The revelation came, utter revelation of what God was doing. Mary, old, because she couldn't have a baby for many years. Mary, very young. It's kind of quite an interesting and dynamic thing. And I think this is, as I said before, I think this is one of the emotional, intimate, and dynamic bits of writing in the whole Bible. And it is, there must be something of depth and breadth. And we've written it. Luke somehow got this, managed to get the details down, which is quite amazing, and actually put it for everyone to read. And it's quite amazing. So I can't say more than that, really, but that it's worth kind of actually looking at these verses again in the quiet of your own self, and just sensing that, does God do that to us? Is it? And I could certainly say yes. The Holy Spirit does come because we are filled with the Holy Spirit, and there are moments when we can actually rejoice. We can do things beyond our understanding because we see that God's at work in situations that come up. God's at work, and the power and the glory of God is seen in us in the same way as this emotional 4 or 5 verses. He's the same today as he was then. His love for us, believe it or not, is the same as it was for Mary, the same as Elizabeth. There's no dilution in it. We have the same Father who loves us just as much. So situations like this are not impossible. And there are moments, I think, when God comes to us and pours his Spirit out on us, and our response should never be, gosh, that was nice. No, we raise our hands, we jump up and down, we what is it, like the lambs, isn't it? I can leap like lambs. I've done it before on a mountaintop when I've seen creation. I've leapt around like a nutcase. Luckily, I was on my own. I realised I was on my own, so I could shout like Billy-O. If you know Chris, who isn't well, he talks to his kids. He said when we go on holiday and we do something stupid, and we shout and bawl, sometimes he said it's very unlikely, but we do. That's called a Ken moment. So I've got a reputation here. But I believe God hopes and expects us at moments in our lives to actually be ecstatic about what he's doing. His fullness, his power, his glory is in us. There we go. How about that?